So that brings us to the concept of how to have design considerations based on patterns. Utilize patterns geometry to define edges. So our pattern creates edges. This is sinuated, serrated, smooth, lobular, notched. Any of these different types of patterns that we can draw create edge. Maximize edge to enhance productivity. So if I create more edge, I can plant more plants. So if there was a straight line here, I could plant 1, 2, 3, 3 of these plants. But in the curve, which is the same distance but point A to point B, I could plant 4. I could increase the productivity by 20% because I did a curve. This is what we want to try to achieve. We want to diffuse media across boundaries. We want to try to utilize our energy to make media move, to increase yield. We want to place translator species to increase flow, whether that's worms, butterflies, bees, or any other species, frogs, newts, fish. We want to increase the flow of nutrients by allowing habitat. So we create habitat to make that happen. Select for compatibility. Be careful that some species don't like to live next to another species. One may be a dominant canopy species, and it will overshadow, take the sun from the subspecies, so that will not be compatible. And orientate things to deform or defect flow. So whether it's the choice of where you walk, since you've been here, guys, you made a choice to come to Raktamachat. That was the last choice you made. I've made every choice since then. I choose where you sleep. I choose where you go to the bathroom. I choose when you eat. I choose what you eat. I chose where you walk. I choose where you sit. I choose the cushion that you sit on. I chose the slide that you're listening to. I chose if the lights are on or off, because that's the design that you chose to enter. You're going to make a design, and people are going to enter your design, and you're going to make those choices for them. How they feel about your design is the choices you make for their experience. So remember, designs are experiential. Designs can also have themes. What is the theme that you would like to portray in your design? I really like to portray at Raktamachat. One is obviously nature or ecological theme, but as well as what I might call a tropical and or a Thai theme. So whether the furnishings, to the choice of fabrics, to the choice of colors, to the choice of this table over any other table that I wanted to use. These are all decisions that are natural but also in line with the particular theme or message that you're trying to convey in your design. Gradients, or the rate of transition. So gravity, hillsides, directs flow. So water going down a hillside. So we could put in swales to slow it down. We can slow down things. So pressure, the temperature, so air pressures, temperatures, acidity with its pH within our soils, the elevations and other properties are all different gradients that we can utilize in our design to understand different gradients and how they will affect movement within our design of energies. Fractals, edge and volume. We can utilize the geometric bending of shapes in order to increase the volume. Okay? So here's a pond. The first pond on the left is 1 hectare in diameter. So the volume inside is exactly 1 hectare of land. But to the right, the edge is deformed. If you calculate the volume inside, it's exactly 1 hectare of volume. But the edge has been increased by 100%. Now, if I was to plant coconut trees on the edge of the ponds, one pond would have 100% increase, or 100 coconut trees on the left, 200 coconut trees on the right. Also, the fish, the stocking density of the pond is tied to the edge where the herbaceous fish are deriving their food sources. So on the right, I will be able to stock more fish, which will have more nutrient cycling. So the water that was pumped to my garden would be more nutritious, if you will, or have more nutrient cycling than the one on the left. So I have increased yield, and the only thing that changed the two systems was the increase in edge. So this is a really, really big property to understand that by deforming edge, we increase yield with less work. So edge, we start to look at pictures that we find to be, wow, look at that. Lots of edge going on in this picture. there's lots of interferences between different systems. The forest, the river, the edge of the forest and the river, the wetlands system that we can see in the foreground. Lots of merging edge. The interference between two ecosystems represents a third, more complex system which combines both. So here we have two ecosystems, the river, the forest, and the wetland. So this is measuring coastlines, which is called Mandelbrot's fractals and edge. So when we see in nature, so this is from space, the coastline, look at all the edge afforded in that coastline. So the fisheries are going to be much more increased. Lots more edge. It's going to make that a very interesting place. Okay? So edge increase is the basically biodiversity of any region. Clouds are not spheres, mountains are not cones, coastlines are not circles, and bark is not smooth, nor does lightning travel in a straight line. And that's a quote by Mandelbrot when he was describing fractals in nature and how when you look to natural patterns, we see these types of replicated fractals. And when we go to study those ecosystems, we find those ecosystems to be much more abundant. The abundancy of the ecosystem is tied to the increased edge. So crenulations, trees figured this out. They'll actually crenulate their edge. They'll take the flat leaf and bend it into a three-dimensional form. Here we have a frog finding habitat in a crenulated leaf. Same thing, the pond. The circle, I crenulate the circle, right? Same interior volume of water, but I increase the stocking density because I increase the stocking density of the food source as tied to the edge. Networks, topology. How we create the relationships or pathways. So some people ask me, well, why did you put the toilet so far away? I wish you would have put it right here. Well, if you were in bungalow number 1, that would be nice. You wouldn't have to walk very far. But if you were in bungalow number 14, you'd have to walk every day twice as much. I make it where you both walk the same distance every day. That's fair. But it might have been better if I put it nearer, because then someone could have gone and checked on it more often, if that was their job to do that, right? So these are type things that we have to make decisions, but where we place elements creates the interactions of people interacting with them. So here we can see like a centralized design, maybe the sala in the middle and everything radiating in a spoke and wheel out of the sala, right? Or we can see nodal design, where we could have the sala, and then obviously we have the natural building node, and then my house node, so we have a more nodal design, or any connections between there. So we can see that as random design all the way to what we might call free scale, or very small world, things very tight, tight, tight. So that the relationship to the movement is tied to how the designs or the nodes are set up. This is access. The access you provide is how people relate to your design. So where you put your pathways, where you put your roads. So sometimes it's really nice to learn from somebody and learn from their mistakes. Have y'all noticed how many times people have driven past here? So it's really nice to look at that and say, wow, what a beautiful driveway. But it might have been appropriate to not have it go straight through the middle of the property. So you see, these are things that we can learn. So if I was to redesign or design a second Raktamachat, I probably would design where the access wasn't as splitting the property in half. So it's in one way very nice and a beautiful picture. But in another way, I have to listen to the, say, traffic or the noise. So we need to think about access, both pedestrian and vehicular. If someone comes into your property, where do they park? I see many, many people that have the aspect of wanting to turn their permaculture project into a business to support their family. People are going to come to interact at their business, and I never see a parking lot. So they don't want, I don't like cars so much that I'm not going to allow them, but how do people get to your place? So it is a thing to think about. We've had buses come from universities and schools here that come here. Where do they park? So the bus driver has to back all the way down the driveway. Not really happy because he can't turn around. Things like this. So patterns in the landscape, let's not forget that we go back to Kansas irrigation periods, non-natural patterns eliciting problems, non-natural problems. Here we go more to a non-contour plowing or to some contour plowing. And when we look at the earthworks, we're going to see how if we would actually pattern our farms based on the natural contours of the land, it alleviates these, say, pattern problems. Some countries never really got that wrong. They never really did those things. So that's a picture from space, Google Earth of Spain, which is called nets and bounds. So in Spanish property development, you're not allowed to cut property other than on a natural boundary. So the surveyor comes in and he says, this is the natural wood lines, this is the river, and they cut and they divide it, and you can't subdivide it if it's not on a natural boundary. So then their properties look more naturalized, and you can even see the picture from space isn't all that squares. It's natural based on the topography of the land. So it doesn't mean that sometimes we have divided things in the wrong way, and maybe in the future our governments will get better at putting properties back together in a more naturalized way. And if that takes a little bit of our autonomy or our perceived ownership away from us owning things, again, can we really own land, or are we the stewards? And if the government was trying to put it back together in a more naturalized manner, where I get this part, you get that part, I still have the same amount, but in a more naturalized manner, then that should be fine. But it'll be hard to do. So people start to take applications. They see these patterns. They have that way of looking at it. Herb spiral in permaculture is very famous. It's a pattern application. So we take the spiral. We say, well, what if we were to build a garden bed and model it on a spiral? And here, what do we get? We get a vertical aspect. The spiral would come up to, say, about 1.2 to 1.5 meters tall. I can touch, I can harvest, right? If I do like this and I reach to this far, do you see how far I am away? And if I go to the other side, that's the width of my spiral. Notice when I reach down, I can't reach as far. So a garden bed that only has one aspect is narrow than if we have vertical aspect. If we put the irrigation through the center and it has a sprinkler on top, the top is going to be wetter. One side is going to be sunny wet and the other side is going to be shady wet, right? At the bottom, we're going to have one side which is, right, sunny dry, and then the other side will have shady dry, and on the two sides we'll have the verge between those. So what we're going to do is create lots of varying climate conditions within that basically pyramid shape in a spiral. So all of our culinary herbs, from the ones that like sun to the ones that like shade, can be put into the spiral. Once we have one spiral, we could again interlock those spirals, right, by using fractals to create interlocked patterns. So you could have a spiral of spirals going up a spiral if you so chose. And this is where we start to play with designs, and we look for what is a function of that design. Why did someone choose to do that? How do you do it? It's really simple. Find your irrigation pivot, put the point up. Yeah? You don't really need to lay this out. You can see spirals. You've seen nature your entire life. You lay the spiral out just by feel. I lay it out, and each time I tear it up. Remember that what you're building up the spiral with is solid clay or earth. Then put compost to grow in. If you build the entire spiral out of compost, over time it will collapse. Okay, so the tiers need to be of soil, dirt. Then you use compost to grow in. So there you go. Afterwards, you can see it's built up. You use some stones, and now you have a nice herb spiral right next to your back door. Would be an appropriate place. I walk out of my kitchen, and there's my herb spiral. I'm going to help someone here. I'll put on my consultant hat. Who would like to have a compost toilet on their design? Anyone? All right, so I'm going to help you about where your compost toilet could be located. So we need to put it somewhere, maybe not right next to my back door, so I might put it a little away from my home. And so every morning, at least for me personally, I like to wake up very regular, and I want to get my coffee first thing, and then I want to get breakfast. So at which time I may also have chores. So I'll come in the kitchen, I'll turn on the pot of water boiling. That gives me about 5 minutes. I'll walk outside to the end of my garden. So I walk through my nice sinuous curve by all of my keyhole gardens, get to the end of my garden next to zone 1 and zone 2, and there's a compost toilet. I go into my compost toilet, I do my business, I wash my hands. The water falls down onto my mushrooms that are lean-to off the side of my composting toilet's structure. That also fills the water for my chickens. I walk down, I feed the chickens. Yeah? I can even, when I harvest my mushrooms, I get the cuttings, throw them to the chickens. I then make sure them take my eggs that I need for my omelet, and also for my wife, because she makes me cook her breakfast every morning, you know. And so I then, on the way back, I strategically planted along the path all of the culinary herbs that I like to put in my omelet. So I grabbed me some tomatoes and a little bit of basil, and I'll grab me some chives, and then I'll walk back, and I'll cook my omelet, and I'll eat, I'll have my coffee, and my chores were done because I needed to take a dump. You think someone could design where they put their toilet in relationship to what they do so that they would save time? This is the zonal spatial relationship to time, how I might think about where I put a toilet to save time every day for the rest of my life. Keyhole application. So I walked by my nice keyhole garden beds, but of course I could think about those in relationship to that overall design, so it's a little bit more macro. So here's a keyhole concept. I look at a door, the old school keyhole. You can see the keyhole overlaid on the von Ekman spirals. So von Karman trails, interrupted alternating Overbeck jets. Okay, so remember the Overbeck jet, the mushroom, is actually the inverted plane of a spiral through turbulence. So there's one, pretty nice. So how do we do that? Well, here's some keyhole garden beds. They can be square, so you can use square foot garden, have a key. You could use wood to create raised beds, very simple. That design is very nice. It's a sinuous path. Why we want to use keyhole garden beds? The aspect is called double reach gardening. What does that mean? I want to be able to reach my garden from both sides. So the entire garden bed on the lower left, every place in that garden bed can be reached from two sides utilizing the keyholes. That's called least path design. I want to design my garden to have the least path in relationship to bed. So this is why we may want to use these shapes in order to maximize the efficiency of the interactions with our garden. Also, the sinuous path, the sinuous nature, makes for a better experience. So I walk along the right-hand side, go to the back, maybe that's my compost toilet, chicken area, worms, my chores, my soil fertility, and then I walk along the other side, and in the morning, I've basically done my gardening, and I go to work. All right?